Let's start with some stats. Stat number one, the global AI market is worth 120 billion and is growing by more than 20% each year. AI will be worth a total of 1.5 trillion by 2030 and is expected to contribute to 15.7 trillion to the global economy by 2030. AI is expected to destroy more than 85 million jobs by 2025. And if you're like me, don't plan to be one of those. But on the flip side, AI will create more than 97 million jobs, even more. And that's what I say. I mean, what does generative AI do for you? You get an extreme amount of acceleration of knowledge and acceleration efficiency. And if you have an extreme amount of acceleration knowledge, you gotta have more work than you could ever do. I mean, there's more work for me to do in AI than I can do in a lifetime, but it's different work, and you have to be willing to change and move forward with it. With that said, we're going to move on pretty rapidly because once again, we do have a hard stop at 5, and I am recording this session, so you will have the opportunity, excuse me, hard stop at 4. I am recording this session, and you will have the opportunity to rewatch this again. This is kind of what I would do right now, and I'll explain why I do this. Okay, so there's 3 systems I like to work with, Hugging Face, Colab, and Custom GPT. And what you would do is if you have an idea, and we're going to show you how to do this today, and hey, this is a great idea, I want to do it, you can actually just throw it into ChatGPT and create code for Colab and run it. And that's pretty nice, but it's only a one-shot deal. And so if you want to interact with it, like with an interface, and I'll go ahead go the other way, and I'll put it in Hugging Face. Now, if that's really something you think you might be able to sell and market, then I might go to Custom GPT, put it on the market, right? And if I don't have an API to drive it, I can put something in the cloud. So that's kind of a good workflow. Now, down here on the side, you're going to see VS Code. I used to do a lot of VS Code, and then when the last release of GPT, it got all gobbled up. I mean, the whole RAG systems I'd been working on and all that stuff, it's got put into Custom GPTs. So I'm concerned about doing so much coding and all of a sudden just disappearing with a new iteration. So I'm kind of trying to stay in this safe zone until I see what ChatGPT 5 is going to do, okay? With that said, we're going to move forward with our first demonstration, fundamental skill. This is a fundamental skill. If you learn a skill, learn this one, how to go from concept to code. Typically in the old days, when you go to concept, you have a lot of different steps and wireframing and all that stuff, but now you can just go directly to code. So we're going to do that in Colab. So the first thing I want to do is just take this prompt, and I'm going to say, write, and this is my idea. Hey, let's see if I can do this. Let's tell ChatGPT, write Python code that can run in Google Colab that shows the moving average and Bollinger Bands for Tesla stock using Y Finance for stock data. Wow, I had an idea. Maybe I want to do investment. I want to take a look at the Bollinger Bands of stock. And without generative AI, I may never be able to get into this field, but now I'm a finance broker. So we're going to throw this into ChatGPT and see what we get. And if you guys have questions, feel free to go ahead and ask those questions at any time. So I'm going to throw this prompt into ChatGPT. And notice what I'm saying. I'm saying, write Python code for Google Colab. And let's see if we can do that. All right. And so lots of times if I want code written, I just say, I don't write it anymore. I just say, ChatGPT, this is what I want. Write this code for me. And I can test it out readily in Colab, which is free. So you can see it's going to install Y Finance. It's got the tickler for Tesla. It's got matplotlib, so it's going to do its plotting for me. It's starting to write the code out for me. George, have you done this type of thing yet?
Yeah. Actually, was
that's
looking
good.
at a
Yep.
orchestrating framework from Microsoft called AutoGen.
Yep. Oh yeah. I've used AutoGen a bit. Yep. They've got another one called HyperGen. I haven't tried that one yet, but I want to try
Oh,
that.
okay.
So I'm going to copy this code, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Colab right away, and let's see if it runs. So Google Colab is like almost like if you've worked with Jupyter Notebook, it's like Jupyter Notebook on steroids, and so it's free, which is nice. And cross my fingers, we're going to hope this runs. So let's throw it in here. We're going to see if the demo gods are good to me today, right? So I paste that in, and I run it. As you can see, I've got my moving average right here, and I have my upper band and my lower band, and they're separated by standard deviation of 2. So it's looking good. We'll see if it works. And lots of times, if you get an error, you just throw the error back in the ChatGPT and say, fix the error, and it does. And this is just getting better and better, so which is really nice. One of the reasons I like to code using this technique is because the models are only going to get better. Now, I think one day it's going to come where you won't be able to code any other way. So if you open that up, well, there you go. That is lovely. And you can see the Bollinger Bands are in green here. I could tell it to make one red and one blue if I wanted to. And here's your moving average. And the blue here is the Tesla stock. So it worked perfectly. And you can add or subtract or tell it to do more. So that's a technique you guys need to master. Telling ChatGPT to code for you. Don't try to code it yourself. All right. And then hook it all up. And so that's the first technique I want to teach you guys today. With that said, we'll move on. All right, so far the demo gods have been good to me. And there's my Bollinger Bands, that's what I got. And it won't always give you the same thing every time, but you can see here it's in a green and here it's in a red for the lower one. All right, that said, there's another technique you need to learn. And lots of times you're going around and it's not so much you have an idea. You may be researching something and you find some code on Jupyter Notebook or it's in Jupyter Notebook. This happens all the time. You get a code segment, you get a code piece, and you'd like to take it into Colab and then you'd like to interact with it and take it into Hugging Face, for example. So for example, maybe I want to learn how to use Gemini, right? So let me click on this. And what this is, it's a tutorial on getting started with Gemini. And it gives me the code that I can, basically a Jupyter Notebook that I can work with and run it. And one of the first things you want to do with Gemini, of course, is get an API key, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's see if we can make this run in Google Colab first, and then we'll move it over, and I'll show you how to move it to Hugging Face, okay? And if you haven't worked with Hugging Face before, then this is a great place for you to see it for the first time. So I'm going to click down. And that's the website we just went to. And here's a section of the code that's going to get you up and running with a generative a model. And this model is going to be Gemini. So let's go ahead and grab this real quick here. Copy this, and let's just run it first in Google Colab. All right. Once again, just go type in Colab, bring up a new Jupyter Notebook, and let's paste it in. One thing you do need to worry about when it comes to cut and pasting, sometimes people get errors because of these apostrophes. Sometimes they get the wrong type comes in and you need to replace those. There are such things as hidden characters. You got to watch out for hidden characters when you cut and paste code. All right, we're crossing our fingers, see if this works. And it says I got an error. Okay, maybe it doesn't like where this is. And maybe it doesn't like this apostrophe. So just like I said, it's something you have to watch out for. And we'll try it again. And that time it's going to run, I believe. And then I'll explain the code to you real quick because it's real simple. And so why is doing this? The first two lines of code here are the installs. That's bringing in the code that you need to run, the packages you need to run. And you can see this is generative AI, and this is generative language. So this is going to be your, there it is, your code for Gemini. The second part of this is going to import Gemini code, and then it's going to actually set up the environmental variable. And notice that environmental variable is, where is that coming from? Where's the key? Well, the key I put right here in a Jupyter Notebook. So, or excuse me, in Google Colab. So it's pretty nice. You can put the key right there. I won't show you my key, of course, but that's where you put it. And notice it has the same name as this name right here, Google AI Studio 02. All right, and with that said, I have a model, and then I call that model and I say, tell me about the biggest planet. And of course, it says the biggest planet in our solar system is Jupiter. So it worked. And this is great because, but the problem with this, there's a problem with this. And the problem is each time I want to do something different, I have to hard code another question. And so I actually want to interact with it back and forth, right? So how do I do that? Well, I can take it into Hugging Face. How do I do that? So let's work through that real quick. And I want to build basically an interface that looks like this, where I can put a query in, type something in, and I get a response, something out. And the way that prompt is going to look, let me bring that prompt up so you can see it. That prompt is going to be, for the following code, create a Gradio interface with an input for the query and an output for the response button to run and give the requirements.txt file as well. So if you're working with those, you know, typically if you're going to work with Hugging Face or even with Python, you're going to need a requirements file and you're going to need an app.py file. And we're going to do that real quick and you'll see, we'll build that out. And then there may be an error. And if there's an error, we're going to, I foresee there will be, it'll be substitute user data implementation with the import OS and use environment. So basically the problem with this particular code example is that it for Colab, it uses users data, but for Hugging Face, you need the OS to grab the environmental key. And it's the type of thing that you'll learn. So let's go ahead and take that code before, right? Let's grab this code and open up ChatGPT. And let me move this screen a little bit. There you go. All right, let's bring up ChatGPT. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and paste this code in, but I'm going to, in front of it, put a question and with that, or a prompt. And the prompt is going to be what I had in the slides. Let's go to that. And the prompt is going to be for the following code, create a Gradle interface with an input for the query and an output for response. Now, there's two types of interfaces that you can do in Hugging Face, and one is Gradle and the other is Streamlit. But in this case, I chose Gradle. So let's grab this right here. That's going to be my prompt. Let's bring our ChatGPT back up. Excuse me. There we go. And let's paste it in there. And so now it's going to just write that for me. You don't, if you ever done this type of work, and I have, it's painful. And if you can get a program just to automatically write all that code for you, it's just beautiful, right? And so it's showing your installs right there. Now that will actually go into your requirements file. So hopefully it will give me a requirements file. And there's your import for your Gradio. And there's your generative AI that will be being brought in for Google Colab. It's using user data, which basically that works for Colab, but that doesn't work for Hugging Face. So we'll fix that. There's your key right there that you're going to need. So you're going to want to put your key into Hugging Face. I'll show you where to put that. Okay. And then that's your model. And there's your get response, which is good. It's going to do so it will call out to your model with the query and return a response. And if you're familiar with Gradle interfaces, it's pretty easy. You have a function, you have an input, and you have your outputs. This looks pretty good, except for one thing, and that is that Colab user. We're not in Colab, we're in Hugging Face. So let me show you Hugging Face. So if you haven't used Hugging Face before, it's kind of my go-to when I want to get a simple interface out there. So you go to Hugging Face, and this is my Eagle Lens ones, is where I have all my experiments. I have 57 of them. And what you would do is you just go in here and go spaces, and you'd create a new space, and that space would be whatever you want to call it. We'll go Gemini experiment. And then you want to choose Gradio, and you could have it private or public. We'll choose private for now since we're just experimenting here. And then you go OK. And you create that space. And then you're going to have, you can start building your file system. And the nice thing about this, if you make it public, anybody can use it. So you can go to my examples and you can pull any code that I have. And it's a great place to be. So I'm actually going to add a few files here. And I'll create a requirements file, .txt file. And before I do that, let me create a code file first, app.py, because I think I copied that, right? Did not do that. So let me go back to my example, cool, and pull my code. And I'm going to want all this code. I'll just copy it and then I'll get rid of what I don't need. So here, sorry about that. Back to Hugging Face. Let's paste it in. And I don't need these imports here because I have that we'll go earlier. And so I pretty much, that's your code. And then you save it and just commit it, okay? And while we're committing that, let's go ahead and do our requirements file. So let's see if we actually got our requirements file as well. And it gave us a requirements file. So let's grab those and put those in. And we're going to create a requirements file. So come along here to files, go add file, create a new file, and we'll call it requirements.txt. And I'll paste those in. So there's going to bring your requirements out. And that's really all there is to working with Hugging Face. You're ready to go. Now what it's going to do, it's going to build this application and you're going to get an error. And the reason you're going to get an error because it doesn't know what to do with that user because that's a Colab. You need to use OS environment to get environment keys into Hugging Face. So we're going to go back to Hugging Face and we're going to actually, go back to ChatGPT and we're going to actually have it fix this code for us. And so I'm going to bring this next one in here and say substitute user data implementation with import OS use environment. So I'm going to copy that and all I'm going to do is tell it to fix it. And that's pretty much the cycle, the work cycle that you need to know. Write code And if it's an error, debug it. And many times I'm having ChatGPT debug its own code. Matter of fact, that's kind of how Code Interpreter does. It writes code, and then if it runs it, and if it doesn't work, it reruns it until it does. So it fixes its own code. And in this case, you can see it actually got rid of the user data, and it added the OS environmental variable. So now we're ready to rock and roll. Okay. So this code is ready to go. So I can go ahead and copy this, right? And go ahead and paste this into Hugging Face, and it will run. And I'll go ahead and go back to this. And I'll go to the API, open that up. I'll go to edit, and we just replace the whole thing, Control A, and can paste, and you're ready to roll. Now you have one more thing you need to do, and that is you need to add that Gemini environment key. So let me show you where to do that. Okay. So if you hit settings right here and you scroll down, you can actually have two types of variables. You can have a secret variable, and you can have just a variable. It turns out in this case that the Hugging Face variable for Gemini has to go in new variable. So you put it here, like you put your Gemini key here. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all that. We'll run over to a working example of this and not worry about debugging any of this right now, because I think we got the codes fine now, and that's what I wanted to show. But let me go and show you a working example of this so you can look at it. And I believe if I was smart, I'd probably put a link to my working example. Okay, cool. And before I do that, show you the working example, I want to show you where to get a Google API key. So if you haven't worked with Gemini before, you can go right here to makersuite.google.com. And when you click on that link and I sent the files in the discussion, you can go there and the slide come up. It's a place where you can get a free Gemini key, which is wonderful because Gemini is giving this key out for free. I don't know why I didn't go there. Let me try again. And you can hit this as much as you want. So unlike OpenAPI, where you're getting charged every time you run the key, this is free. So if you want a key, just hit Get Key. And then you can see this is my key right here. Of course, I won't show it to you, but you can copy that key, and that's what you want to put into Hugging Space. So let's take a look and see if I got smart enough to put the link in this slide for the Hugging Space. I think it is right here. And here's the actual working example. So this is public, so you guys can actually go to my files, and you can actually copy these files. And you can click on them and see the code that I put in there. You can see there's my OS. There's my Google using the environmental variables, right? Right here, OS environmental. And here's my query function. And I believe I put the old code below that. And that will run. It's just that easy. And then if you go ahead and take a look at the other files, there's your requirement files right there. And there's the Gradial, and there's the two Google files. And then if you go to settings and you scroll down, you can see this is where you put the variable right there. And you can view that. I'm not going to click on that because I don't want to show you my key. Sorry about that. But that's where you put your key. So if you're ready to set up and run inside it, just go copy my code and use it because it's free. All right, with that said, let's run it and see if it works. So basically, this is pretty great. I love this. Anybody got a good question for me? What would you like to ask Gemini? Anybody got a question for Gemini?
Let's ask it something about the news, right? Usually that's the challenge, right?
What is the hottest thing in the news news right now? I don't know what it's going to say. Okay, so I'm not responsible here. So let's see what it says.
Okay.
All right, and then I think I got a few questions here. George says, "Thank you, Michael. This is the community I lead." Oh, good. George actually has put in the community that he leads here, guys. So if you guys want to go here and be a part of it, it is Deep Learning Adventures. And George, I'm going to check that out as well. Thank you for that comment. And let's see what we got here. Lots of news here. Artificial intelligence at the top, right? SG connectivity, virtual reality, blockchain technology, a lot of tech news, right? So, and one of the things I really like about Gemini, it just seems to go out to the web very easily, where OpenAI does not do that well. And so I'm enjoying that because I'm actually building an app right now where I need that functionality. So I'm specifically using Gemini for that. So there you go. That's an example. And the key skills here is to be able to just take it into ChatGPT, tell it what you want, and debug it, and then you're ready to roll. So lean heavily on these tools to write code for you. Don't try to write it line by line anymore if you can avoid it. Okay. With that said, we are going to move on to our next example because we got a lot to do here, and we got 30 more minutes. All right, so I want to talk about Llama Index, and this is kind of interesting. If you were like me, you kind of got like a frog boiled slowly, right? And so I started off a year ago as soon as, ChatGPT came out, like first day I saw it on YouTube, and I started working with it. And of course, I was doing interface stuff. And then, of course, you always want more. And so the next thing you know, you want to start programming. So you start programming other things. And LangChain is just fantastic because it allows you to chain things together. It allows you to do agents. I mean, it's all types of things. And then you have stuff like Llama Index, which you can use with LangChain, and Llama Index gives you the ability to bring in a lot of different type of documents, right, to build a RAG system if you'd like. And so it has data connectors, and it provides ways to structure your data, and it's advanced retrieval and query interface, and it has various integrations. You can see it integrates with OpenAI, with Anthropic, with Docker, with GPT, with Hugging Face. It does all that. So it's really cool. And so my question is, well, I want to get started. How do I get started with this, right? And so lots of times you're going to go somewhere and you're going to find something like let's see here. I'm sorry, got off it just real quick. You might find something in a Google Notebook, right? And you want to run that maybe in Hugging Face, right? So so you search the web and you look for something and you find a notebook, right? That's going to give you a beginner start with a Llama. And then you can put some code together, right? And so here's some code here that will work in Llama. And you can see here's your query engine. So it all works well. And in this particular case, I need an OpenAI key. Okay, great. So with that said, I went there from that Jupyter notebook, I pulled this portion of code. Import OS, there's my OS environment, and here's my OpenAI key. And from Llama index, you need a vector store and a simple directory reader. And then it's really cool because it's going to pull, you're going to have a data folder, and it's going to pull whatever that is in that data folder into like a RAG system, and you can create a vector database. And you're going to query against whatever you want to query against, okay? So I had a really interesting thing to query against. And so for this, I'm going to create this prompt for the following code: run a Gradle interface that has an input for the OpenAI key and question and output for the response, and include all imports, and finally give the requirements txt file. So I'm going to just take this section of code, and I'm only doing this. I'm going to the web, I'm finding sections of code, and I want to make them functional. So I just bring them in a ChatGPT and I write that code. And we're going to do that for Llama Index. Isn't that pretty cool? So I don't know anything about Llama Index. I do, but I say I didn't. And I wanted to run it and do an example, and then I want to interact with it in Hugging Face. This is one way to do it. So let's go ahead and go for it. So I'm going to take this code, open up ChatGPT, and I'm going to come on here, and I'm going to paste that code in, and then I'm going to put my prompt on top of it. Now, so far, guys, the demo gods have been really good to us, so we'll see how this goes, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my slides, and I'm going to say, for the following code, write a Gradle interface, and I'm going to put that in front of it. And it's going to write the Gradle interface for me. Now, I used to be an interface programmer many years ago. So to see this happen where it's all happening automatically, I just really, just unbelievable. Writing interfaces for you automatically, that's just so sweet. And so there you go. It's going to create that Gradle interface for you, and it's going to create a text requirements file for you. So you don't have to do anything. And there's your OS, and there's your Gradle, and GR is for Gradle. And then you got your Llama index, and you got your vector store index, and you got your simple directory reader. That's good. That's things are going well here. And then if you keep going down, you're going to pull your data reader from some type of directory, and that's fine. Load data. I'm going to do a little bit of work on this code if you don't mind. And then you have your index, which will be your vector index from the documents that you pull in. And you have your query engine, and you have your index engine. Now, in the interface, there's a few things. It gave me a little more than I really needed, okay? But I'm going to take a look at this real quick. And matter of fact, let's do this before I get too far into this. I'm going to go to the next slide and pull that up so we can examine this code. So just a few things here. I got this data directory here, and then I have this input into the data directory. I don't really need all that, so I can actually eliminate this line of code, and I can just change this to data. And I'm going to put a data folder in there, and it's going to pull directly from my data folder. And whatever information I dropped into that data folder, it's gonna take care of. Okay. And then what I got for requirements file was to put in Gradio and Llama index. Great. So I'm ready to take this over to uh, uh, into Hugging Space. And I've actually done that. So I'm gonna pull this up for you guys so you can see it. And you can see I'm going kind of fast because we only have a limited time. And so I took that code that was generated, and we'll look at the files real quick. And for the app file, there you can see the code that was generated by ChatGPT. I got the import Gradio, the OS for the key, and that's going to be my open API key. So I'm going to have to input that into a text box. And here's my document, and I have a data folder. So whatever it's in that data folder, it's going to pull in, and then I'm going to index it. And then from that index, I'm going to query against it using OpenAPI, and I'm actually going to search that document. Now you can have a YouTube in there, you can have a website in there, you can have. Well, we're going to pull the Book of Genesis in there because there's a trick question I like to test these APIs on. Someone once had me do a biblical program for them, so I always have that as a trick question, and I'll tell you what that trick question is in a moment. And it's going to pull all that in, vectorize it, and you can search it and talk to it and see if it can answer questions about that, whatever document. It doesn't just have to be what I put in there. Okay, so that's pretty sweet. And we scroll down a little bit more, and this is your Gradio interface. And that Gradio interface is going to be basically um, uh, um, a place to put the API key and a place for the text box and then for your outputs. So let's go ahead and take a look at the requirements file now. Now in the requirements file, I got an app, I got a requirements file. You can see that's and I'm going to need PYPDF because I'm using a PDF. And I have transformers. I don't need that. That's for another program coming later. I got Llama index. And I have LangChain because I don't really need LangChain either for this one is all ever. So a little bit of overkill here because sometimes I build other things on top of other things. So with that said, I looked at app, and there's one more thing we need to look at. I have a data file right here. And in that data file, what I did is I just drag and drop the Book of Genesis right in there. And it's just gonna vectorize the whole book for me. So I got a data here. So you can see the data file, whatever I throw in there. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be from that. It can be anywhere, and you can throw it in there. And there's a real simple question I want to ask it. So let's run the file. So with that said, all you have to do is run this as an app. And so the first thing it does, and I like this, it wants an API key. So if you don't want to code your API, if you want to make something public and you don't want to code your API key in, because every time you hit open API key, you get a charge. You can do it this way. You can have it, you can just put the API key on the outside and paste it in every time. Now I'm going to move it out of the way here. I'm going to grab that API key. And let me go to the hackathon. There's my API key. I will be erasing this API key or deleting it after this presentation. And I'll put the API key in. Now this is ready to roll. So now I've got Llama index running. Now the big question I like to ask it when it comes to this, how many wives did Abraham have? So we're going to ask this question. How many wives did Abraham have? And this is a good test. And so the reason why this is a good question is because Abraham's name was changed in the middle of the text. He went from Abram to Abraham. So this is what it says. And then there's a biblical argument. Was Keturah actually one of his wives, or was he a concubine? So, or was she a concubine? So, it's kind of fun to ask it this question because it's not going to know. I want to see how well, Llama index performs. So Abraham had 2 wives. Really? Now it doesn't remember context. So we're going to say, but it is questioning the knowledge base. Who were the wives of Abraham? Submit that. And the wives were Sarah and Keturah, so it didn't even get Hagar. So who knows? Let's say Abram. Let's put Abram in there because that was his original name. Let's see what it says who the wives of Abram was. Sarah and Hagar. So we got Sarah and Hagar, but left out Keturah. So there you go. Well, anyway, that's pretty cool, and that's how quickly it is. Now I'm going to show you a whole different way to do this using custom GPT. So we're going to build a RAG system using custom GPT. So let's go ahead and bring our slides back up here. And so this is one of the things that happen. And this is what have all of us is kind of sitting on the edge of our seat, is that when chat on November 6th, when Sam Altman released his new version, his custom GPTs, about 20% of the market just got gobbled up. Things that people have been working on and just pouring hours and hours of work into, and like this, we could do this, what we're about to do just so easily using custom chat GPT just got gobbled up. And a lot of people are saying he got fired because of Q star, but other people said he got fired because he gobbled up 20% of the market. A lot of people didn't like that. So it depends on if you're an investor and suddenly that money just goes away, you might make some people mad. I don't know. Just, nobody really knows the reason except those who are closest to it. But what we're going to do here, and you've seen, I talked about how you got the data there and how it's used, but what we're going to do is talk about RAG systems. We're going to build a RAG system using custom GPT, right? So basically what a RAG system is, it's called retrieval augmented generation. And what retrieval augmented generation does for you, it actually takes the query and turns it into an embedded vector. And that embedded vector is near the document, in the same embedded space close to other vectors with the same information. So it pulls that information back and combines it into the question and talks to an LLM and gives you a response. That's essentially what it's doing. So what happens is these large language models, they're trained, but they don't have all the information in them. So you can extend their brain by using a vector store. And that's the trick that's being done here. All right, we're going to build the same thing using a custom RAG. Isn't that a crazy name? So we're going to bring up ChatGPT and we're going to build the same system without any code. I'm not going to write a single line of code. And it's going to do the same thing and maybe give us a better answer. We'll see. Okay, so let me bring up ChatGPT and do this for you. Or while this is coming up, are there any questions? You guys have anything you want to ask? Ask anything you want. I mean, this is your time.
Yeah,
What do you
I
think?
had a
So
question
go
regarding the
ahead, George.
vector space that you showed earlier for
Yeah,
Llama Index.
yeah.
Is that their own custom proprietary vector store, or is it based on some known open source
That
vector
is coming.
stores?
That is their vector store. Yeah, they have their own vector store that they're using right
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, with that said, we're going to build this all in ChatGPT. And if you want to build a custom GPT and you haven't done one before, it's really easy. Just hit Explore. And we're going to hit Create GPT. And then it will try to walk you through that. And I typically go right to config and I start coding. But I mean, I start not so much coding. I start telling it what to do. And then, but right now we'll just tell, hey, we're going to do Genesis. We'll call it Genesis RAG, something like that. And it's going to come up with some ideas for me. And it can give me an icon. So good. So give me an icon. And what it will be, it will give me a nice little icon that will represent your GPT. Okay. Now, why it's doing that, there's an icon. Oh, I like that. Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks. That's cool. And then what I can do is go to config and start working it. Now, I want to show you some of the things that you have in config that you can do. And you can notice you can turn on web browsing, you can turn on DALL-E, you can turn on code interpreter. Below here are code actions, and code actions allow you to use APIs. And I have other videos where I show how to work with the APIs. Today, we're specifically going to be interested in something called knowledge, and that's this section here. And so I'm going to upload that file in the Book of Genesis from my desktop. And what it's going to do is going to throw it in its own vector system. There you go. And now it's vectorizing it, chunking the data and everything that a vector database would see. Now it's all automatic. I'm not doing any coding at all. And so it's up there already. So I'm going to get off of web browsing, get off of DALL-E. I don't need any of those. I'm going to say search knowledge for the questions asked about Genesis. Okay, cool. And then I'm done pretty much with the whole thing right there. I'm done. And I just coded, using ChatGPT, and you can do three things: only me, anyone with a link, and everyone. If you do that, you have to have basically a privacy policy attached to that. So let's see. It doesn't like it because there's no name. So let's make sure there's a name here. Search Genesis. Okay, something like that. And let's save it. Okay, only me. Confirm. Cool. And I'm done. I'm gonna say how many wives did Abraham have? Let's see. See what it does. And see, it's searching knowledge. So it's going to the vector space, vector database that ChatGPT created for me automatically. So a lot of people were doing a lot of work on vector databases and creating systems like Llama Index, and now this does it automatically. It says Abraham had multiple wives. The first mention of text was Sarah. Later, another one was Keturah, interacting. So that didn't quite give me a good answer either. So let's say how many wives did Abram? Because his name changed. That's why it's such a trick question. We'll go with that one. Okay, see what it does. Once again, it's going and searching that vector database for that knowledge, and we'll see what it says. It's the two wives, Sarah and Hagar. So it doesn't even say Keturah. So there you go. I like this question because it tricks up the system. So there you go. But anyway, you can see the same system that I wrote, with code. Now I just wrote without code. So it's a codeless system. Good. Well, we have another one to show you here real quick. Let me comment. What I really like about these systems is that you can program as fast as you can think. So if you can come up with a laundry list of things, that you do, and then you can just put them into there and it'll run it. So I have lots of examples where I do that. So George says, "Thank you, Michael." Okay, good. And then Thad says, "No, but it's interesting. Yes, you can just build these all day long." So you can see I have like 24 of these things right there. I just crank them out. I have a movie script maker that I make movie scripts from. And what it does, it goes out to the web and grabs the top 20 movies of the week. It takes those 20 movies and turns them groups them into 4 and gets them personalities, turns them into persons. And these 4 people, they talk through building a movie based upon their opinions of what should be in a movie. And then they go out and they give you DALL-E images and the whole 9 yards. So I have a lot of write up on that. And you can see they went out and got these 4 people and it gave them names. And now they're going to talk through, they're going to build a movie, right? So it's pretty cool. And they're suggesting, they're actually going through like agents and they're talking through, someone mentioned AutoGen. It's kind of like an AutoGen system I wrote. And they're talking through and building, what the protagonist should do and what his name should be. And now they're going to give you an image of the protagonist. And so this is a little more of an advanced GPT. We'll look at the code here in one moment. We'll get the image out here. So I don't know if this is your question, if I have a choice of what model. In this particular case, the model being used is OpenAPI. But with that said, if I write there's your protagonist. There's your protagonist right there. And so you can see in the configuration file right here, if I open that up, the way I do this is I tell it, once I click that movie writer, go through the following steps. And I have step 1, step 2, step 3. So I have 7 steps it walks through. This works really well because it's like chaining in LangChain, but now I can do it just by talking, by words. So it walks through the different chains with the items. It talks about the creating a protagonist, a storyline, supporting characters, and conditions. So these act like subroutines. So it's pretty cool how you can work this like code. And so since I had a LangChain background, the first thing I started trying to do is make these configuration files act like LangChain. Okay. One thing that you ask about is in this file, you can see there is an actions file, and this actually is a schema. So potentially you could write a schema for another model out there and bring that in. We'll go to our last example today. So the last one I want to talk about Trua, and Trua is just a really amazing system because what's happening is the same thing that happened in the 80s where people started writing code like crazy, but they didn't know how to make it secure. They didn't really understand what it was doing. The same thing. We're writing all these models. We don't really understand what's really going on, why it makes certain decisions. It does. And I'll give you an example. The way a model can tell if something's a sports car, it looks at 2 points. Its wheel and its roof. That's it. Did you know that? I didn't know that. So these things are working in ways that we really don't understand. And so Trua has come along, and Trua is kind of almost like a governance software. And it looks at, does model comparison, stability, segment analysis, reliability, bias, and accuracy. And the way I used Trua is I wrote a movie script from the movie script editor I just showed you, and I wanted to see if it had bias. And so what I did, I actually created a RAG system that I could throw the movie script into. So let me go ahead and go to that right now. I believe I have a link. Let's see here. Let me go to my Hugging Space. I want to pull the link and then grab the movie script, and I'm going to see if it has bias, and I'll show you the RAG system I built. And we've got 10 minutes to do that in. So I'm gonna go back to Hugging Space. And by the way, guys, I'll go ahead and put my Hugging Space in there. Feel free to go in there, copy any code that you want. Don't worry about even crediting me. Just use it, okay? And so let me put that in there. Feel free to use any of my code without even crediting me. What do you think of that? There's my Eagle Lance once if you want to look at the Hugging Space. So we're gonna go to Hugging Space real quick here. You can see going down a little bit. Let me open up one of this. This was the editor, movie editor. And in this movie editor, I actually wanted to use Trua to tell me if the script was biased. Okay, so let's show you the system I wrote and how it works, because now we're starting to look at these custom ChatGPTs. Right, go back to GPT, and we're going to go to, let me see if I have it here. There it is, my Trua RAG right here. And so what I did, because now these RAG systems are so easy to build, what I did is I took every document that I could find on Trua, and I threw it in to this knowledge system, which basically just throws it all into a vector database. And now I can search this vector database. And there's different things: performance, expandability, fairness, and bias. And so let me go ahead and run the system for you real quick and show you how it works. I'm just going to view the GPT. And I'm going to say this. Let me scroll up a little bit. Look at the following script and let me know from knowledge, because that's what I want to look at, knowledge, if it is biased. And so that's pretty cool, right? It's going to go through that script. It's going to read it. It's going to look in that vector database and bring the relevant documents forth and talk to the LMN and come back to me and let me know what's biased and not about this particular script that I wrote. And this is an important thing, because you're going to see one of the things that AI is going to do is kind of bring a new level of transparency that we're not used to. It says the script you provided does not exhibit obvious bias in its narrative. It portrays a futuristic adventure involving two main characters, Orion and Luna, who embark on a quest to find ancient artifacts. And it goes on and it talks about some things. And later on, and I don't know about this particular example, let's see here. As per my knowledge, it's been noted that AI projects may deliver erroneous outcomes due to bias in data, algorithms, or management teams. Well, there you have it. So I didn't find any bias in the script, so I could feel pretty comfortable about it. But sometimes when you ask it questions like this, it can give you information you're not necessarily looking for. And that's a good thing. Okay. So that's the RAG system that I built, and it just worked great. I was really happy about it. So now you should know how to build RAG systems in ChatGPT. All right, so today the things that we covered 4 things basically: concept to Colab, Colab to Hugging Face, going to GitHub, right? And we went to GitHub to Hugging Face. Code that you found on GitHub because we pulled the I believe the llama index from GitHub, and then how to go from a custom GPT to a RAG. Those are 4 elements we had today, and we have 6 minutes left for questions. What do you think, guys? Pretty cool stuff, huh?